That's kind of, I think, no? And this is my email address. So back to you, Anthony, for introduction.
Hi, Anthony Pinto. I just noticed my first name is misspelled on this slide, but that's okay. Missing an H. My fault. I should have checked it earlier. So I've been teaching at the University of West Florida. I just finished my 22nd year in the computer science department. We started our cyber program. I put it together for the fall of 24, and we got CA designated in 2016, and then we're part of the pilot program for the new redesignation program in 2020. Teach a variety of cyber courses, malware analysis, pen testing, a wargaming class, things like that, and a lot of software courses as well. So as mentioned, you can email us if you have any questions, and that's it for me.
Okay, great.
Thank you for fixing that, by the way.
Yeah, of course. I apologize.
No, that was my fault. I reviewed the slides. I just didn't notice it till just now.
So these will be our guidelines, and sorry, suddenly why the presentation is kind of the outlines is, I fixed everything and suddenly. So these will be our outlines. And again, this will be, we are not teaching, it will be completely discussion. If you have any questions, feel free to pause and stop us at any time. As we are actually covering Intro to Cybersecurity, it is a very, very broader topic, as we know, and throughout the United States, everyone teaches differently, and their content will be completely vary based on what major they are teaching, starting from social science to engineering to computer science. So again, if you have something which we missed, please feel free to include so that everybody can be benefited. So that's been started. In the introduction to information security or cybersecurity course, I teach here, or I've been teaching, is that first the topics we covered is CIA triad, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability, as we know. And we generally ask the first thing when I go to the first class, and I taught both in semester system and in quarter system. In the quarter system, it goes very fast, 10 weeks. So I technically have a kind of 8 weeks because there is midterm and final term. And so it's a very, very short time period to cover a lot of materials. So the first thing I kind of do activities in the class is ask the class, define, explore each terminology. Do they understand how confidentiality has been practiced in their day-to-day life, or integrity component of it, though this type of terminology may be new or they have heard it. So it's kind of create an environment where there will be discussion component of it. And before explaining them why it is important and why CIA triad is very, very important, not only practicing within the organization, but also understanding of every point of view. So I kind of share that CIA triad goes from fundamental to PhD. The first thing everybody talk about is confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information and data we need to protect. And then when we talk about challenges, what are the challenges presently which is involved to secure information? And these are the current trends going on. These are the challenges to secure information in the present time, particularly ransomware. It's a very high rise. As we know, every day there is an incident and data breach happens. And there is I discuss with them what are the examples of ransomware, for example, famous Colonial pipeline breach, and what happened, and help them navigate the activities that they have to do the research. Majority of the students new to cybersecurity was never heard of it, though in a different terminology they heard, but kind of data breach sense. Then when we talk about cloud third-party threats, okay, so what is cloud and how it will impact? Well, if they have taken some kind of database class, if they have taken some kind of cloud components of the class, and how kind of that connect back to the threats, and how it is a very, very concerning, the different types of clouds are availability. mobilewares particularly. When we talk about zero-day vulnerabilities, well, like what is zero-day vulnerabilities? We knew about vulnerabilities within the system and hardware, software vulnerabilities to fix it. But when we talk about zero-day, what is the context of zero-day? Why it was naming as a zero-day? Because it was like really open to security community that particular day, kind of sharing information. What are the zero-day examples so far we know of? Having those discussion kind of helps. And then when we talk about like global attack on businesses, again, that's kind of like, what are the current attacks our allies, like especially in the United States, who are facing, because this is not a single problem, it's a joint problem. We have to work in collaborative way, and kind of like having like forming them in a team and giving these topics to explore and research in the first class helps them to navigate it through, because it will develop their competency level of communication, or also like more research, so that they are not dependent on us completely. Once they finish the course, they are able to communicate what they learned within the course. Anthony, how do you approach this particular topics in your class?
Well, generally, things like this, I always want to try to engage students, because a lot of the times lectures, slides and stuff kind of just get somewhat mundane. So probably, my approach, as we said here, was to ask them to define some of the parts of the triad, and then also the challenges. You might just pose a question: what do you think some of the cybersecurity challenges are? Let's brainstorm them and see what they come up with and discuss those, and then introduce some of the new ones and see what people know about those, and that kind of thing. You can certainly do that as well as go through slides, but again, the focus there, and at least in this type of thing, I would say would be more of an engagement and asking the class to attempt to participate, brainstorming and that kind of thing. So would be my approach.
Okay, great. So thank you for sharing that. I would like to ask all of us who are present here, how do you approach to your class, if you ever actually taught intro to cybersecurity class, or do you actually do activity, or you just like introduce the topics and like let them sink for first class so that you can ask those questions in the second class? If you have any thoughts, one or two thoughts, or you can post it in the chat. Like whenever you go to the first class of Intro to Cybersecurity, how do you approach students?
I have a quick question for anybody, including our two speakers. Do you guys have any good like homework questions or assessment questions? I know I typically do like a scenario, like identify if this is confidentiality, integrity, availability, but does anybody have like any other ideas on like how to like kind of assess knowledge of this? Because sometimes I get to the final and I still have people that are answering integrity incorrectly.
When I'm testing people for their knowledge, I will often have them look up a case of where somebody or a company may have violated one of the triad, and then that would give them insight not only into what it is, but an example of how it was applied, by law, or how somebody may have violated that.
That's a great tool. I do tabletop exercises, like 15 minutes tabletop exercises for giving them a scenario. When I try to give them a 15-minute scenario, they have no idea how to approach. Like, for example, if you are going to a conference, and just giving an example, if you are going to a conference and somebody literally handing over thumb drive as a swag at your conference, what do? How do you respond? Should you just bring it and just put it on in your computer, or do you just like really happy about it and really get excited, think that, oh my God, this is such a cool tool, and come back to the class and share it with everyone, so that not only you are impacted in your computers, everybody will have. So that's one of the tabletop exercises, or kind of a scenario based, kind of a very regular day-to-day social engineering scenario I share with them and try to get their response.
Hi, everyone. Everybody can hear me?
Yes, Vinita.
Okay, yes, my name is Vinita. I am teacher at community college. You both are teaching it in a four-year university. We just introduced it last fall. This is our second semester teaching the introduction to cybersecurity. Right now, this is one of the core selective in the cybersecurity program. We are thinking of going it in a broader level to gen ed courses because all students coming into the community college level should take one elective. So we are planning right now in the process of making it as a gen ed course. So all the students will be taking it. So currently we are teaching the topic you posted it, Introduction to Cybersecurity, CIA, Social Engineering. We are covering 3 weeks on that one, and cyber crime, cyber hygiene. We are covering viruses and malware, and then web smartphone, and a little bit of networking also we are covering. But right now, currently, we are teaching it as an online completely. We are hoping that we are maybe teaching it as a in-person class or a blended format. When you say tabletop things, I don't know how you can do that in the online course. I would like some recommendations. Also, do you have any recommended textbooks? We had a hard time selecting a book. We selected a book, but it's not the great. So we are providing a lot of resources, online resources as a supplement the textbook. So that also I would like some recommendation on textbook.
Vinita, thank you so much for your question. So in the online environment, the scenario basically is doing a Zoom breakout session and putting them like 3 to 4 students with a particular question and tell them to come up with the ideas. Sometimes to encourage them, like as a positive reinforcement, I share like, okay, you will get like 1 or 2 points and not the credit, 1 or 2 points for a activity towards their final. So kind of
Yeah,
like
but ours is a completely online, 100% asynchronous format. That's not like an online in-person, I mean, online remote teaching. It's like a completely, no group, maybe like what you're saying that is a group work, grouping it in the, and then no, I mean, it's an asynchronous format. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Okay, so in synchronous format in the Zoom Live, you can do breakout sessions. And in an asynchronous format, if you are using Canvas or e-learning or Blackboard, you can put them in a group so that in the discussion question, like in the discussion section, they can actually reply to each other and they can actually interact with them like each other, encourage them to learn about themselves. Like if it's asynchronous, they never meet online at all, then they can do using discussion components of the feature within the Canvas and put them in a group. They will be actually replying to each other.
Thank
So-
you.
Can I, if I can add to that too, what we found is that sometimes it's better to meet the students where they are, and a lot of our students now use things like Discord. So we have Discord channels for all our courses that we set up, and so the students can they meet there, and the instructor can go there. If you have a GA or a TA, they do too, and ask questions and discuss things even in online classes. So that's just another way rather than make them come to Canvas and use the discussion board, which they tend not to like to use, or most of them are already in Discord. A lot of competitions, organizations, and other informational sources in the cyber community use Discord. So that's just something to think about.
Thank you. But also I'll like some recommendation for the textbook also. If you have put it on a chat also, that would be
Yeah,
helpful.
let me look and see which one we use now, and I'll put that out there for you.
And I believe Kyle also put in a recommendation for a textbook into the chat.
And Vinita, actually, I'm also putting it, the Intro to Cybersecurity book, which is Cybersecurity Awareness, in Cengage, which we use in our schools as well. So for you to take a look, they also have different tools using Cengage platform. I can able to share. So this is a book we use for our kind of like Intro to Cybersecurity course. And one of the thing is that like they also have instructor resources to like, no, what's going on? So they also have this instructor resources to like, you can actually add it in your like MindTap platform by Mark Simpa, kind of cover all the topics, which kind of like very relevant. to the present time. And I think that there is a new edition, 6th edition came up, which is really like focus on not only security awareness, but every topic like mobile, social engineering, and privacy, those topics as well. So may want to check it out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I hope there is no other questions in the chat. Good. So we will move on to this next topic. So again, within the intro to cybersecurity, as I mentioned that like it may take a couple of weeks or kind of like based on how many times you meet and how you teach your course, whether it's synchronous online, asynchronous, that's or hybrid. Like those are a full format at the University of Washington we teach. And these are the topics we kind of cover, like malware, denial of service, and phishing, code of injection, supply chain, and especially like give this topic to students and come up with first explain that what is the meaning and how this like what is malware means and where can they get more information regarding that, and kind of share some video resources like when we talk about phishing, spoofing, and particularly insider threat, and kind of like give them a short video of a scenario which actually done in different conferences like Black Hat and DEF CON. Black Hat generally like have the conferences videos resources online if you go to the Black Hat YouTube, and DEF CON as well. So there are security professionals who are actually sharing their experience and role play of being a victim and being somebody who is actually scamming through the phone and getting the password. And there are also real life scenarios where they are putting themselves to test. I have one. So that's kind of like today's cyber attacks, and this is like very much. And then describe what is asset and threat, who are the threat agent because of the particularly like in an attack and defense situation. I also share when we talk about like introduction to class about some kind of cyber defense information. And one of the information I share is kind of like showing them, so showing students, give me a second, please, to go back. Okay. Oh, why? Okay. So kind of like a threat map checkpoint to kind of show them how it works, like live cyber threat map. And that's kind of like, adding them to different, like they can go and play with this particular website. And that's kind of like makes them cool because who are the top target of cyber breach? As we can see, education, where we are part of, government, and communication. And what are the top malware, like botnet, phishing, and mobile? And so that's kind of like give them a environment like, oh my God, this is really happening. It's like, though we are talking, but this is like a live one. So they can go play around with it with the web server. And this is will kind of like come up with the thoughts and conclusion that like, how can we defend based on the skill set they have? And there is also another component of it called like to know, called OWASP. I hope everybody can see my screen. Okay, thank you. Please let me know if you are not able to see. Sometimes Zoom kind of. So OWASP is one of the great resource for everyone, especially for students who will kind of like understand intro to cybersecurity, is that what are the top 10 security application risk? Because we all use phone, we all use computers, we all use different kind of technology and dependent on technology. If our phone will take away, especially students we teach, if we take their device away, it will be disaster for them. And it's just a cautious component. So kind of give resources for them to do like understand what is OWASP top 10. Don't have to go deeper, but just to aware of it kind of helps that how can they kind of come up with kind of teach each other like vulnerability injection, kind of understanding the meaning of it. So that's one of the components. And another one also we shared with our students is that CISA has a huge kind of glossary where all the definition of different terminology they are able to get. And this terminology will actually help them. It's like a dictionary that when we look for one word, we look for 10 different words. Well, no more dictionary we are looking at because we are asking either AI or looking at online. So this kind of glossaries actually help them to understand the terminology. For example, if I say validation or validator, value, it has all the definition. Suppose variable, it has the definition, but in a context of a relevant resources, especially when we talk about CISA, NIST is what is NIST in the context of what is their definition, kind of helps to understand the terminology as we are going through the information security kind of like an introduction in the first couple of weeks. Anthony, do you have like how do you approach this?
Generally what I like to do here is search for strong examples of these types of things that you may find in the news or in some of the other databases or places that you mentioned. And so that it's not just like a definition, it's an example of, you know, what a 0-day attack looks like, what one was, why was it a 0-day, that kind of thing. And sort of so that the students can put the idea with something tangible and not just research or looking things up and stuff like that. So you could always find lots of examples, and you could also show that sometimes it's not categorized, so it may be multiple things, right? It may be a 0-day and something else. It probably is, right? It's a hardware attack or a denial of service attack or something like that. So I just really think trying to create examples in real world helps there. That would be my main approach to that.
So thank you, Anthony. I
You're
would
welcome.
I would like to open these questions to all of our colleagues. Is that like, do you have any other activity you practice in class that which will helpful? And as Anthony was mentioning about like kind of like looking for an exploit, one of the great resources for exploit will be this particular database, which is students can go and check, is the exploit DB. And it's an exploit database where they can actually search for based on what type of exploits categories and what are the platforms. Like, for example, Windows, if they are using any kind of like Python programming language, and it will actually shows up and very cool, like any type of port, if they have some networking background, who are the authors, and the tag, if they have any kind of like, suppose code injection. And we can see that like it will literally show up of how different information, it's a lot of information, but it is kind of like help students to categorize and learn more things, which is suppose like local components of it, and suppose Python. And if we kind of click on one exploit, this looks like something like this. And it will talk about like CVE, who is the author, who is reported it, what is the platform. We kind of found out that this is prison management system, SQL injection authentication. Like it's recently, like I think three days ago. And this is a vulnerability. And this is kind of like super cool database for them to do the research as we kind of like go through it as well. So that's kind of an example for you to share with students and come up with like a activity that like, okay, go to this database and find out like what are the, what's it called? Like give them a product name. For example, give them a platform name or find out like, top 10, like top 10 exploits you find in 2024 or in this month, because it is reported every day, which is a local rather than remote. So kind of like having come up with ideas which will help them kind of go through more deep dive into it, that when we talk about exploit of database, it talks about data, like different types, the platforms, authors needs to be, which port it is kind of exploits to. So these are the categories will help them to connect back if they will take like any kind of website, web programming class or database class, because those classes are interrelated. So any other suggestions from our colleagues, if what are the additional things can be done in this kind of scenario? So Renee, I agree with you, like how to spot an attack.
Yeah, and also research and choose the real world cyber attack case. They have to give a presentation. And so if it is an online student, they have to create a YouTube video and for less than 10 minutes. And so it has to be usually I ask them the whatever the case they select, it has to be approved by the faculty. So that seems like an interesting project for the students. So they have to choose, go and do Google and find out what will be a real cyber attack case. So that's another interesting topic.
Thank you, Vinita. Any other colleagues before we move
When
on?
when you take a security plus, one of the things that they show you is a bunch of logs and like, what kind of attack is this? And it's even in most security training books, you won't see those attacks, and it blindsides you and you're like, oh, wow, okay. Now you got to read through it and kind of take your best guess at that point. And I feel like that's one very important thing, right? And in class, what I actually do is I'll have people send information via HTTP, and then I'll have other people on Wireshark investigating those things, so they could see what it looks like when you're sending plain text across the network versus when you're saying it securely. So it's a good way to kind of let them get their feet wet and see how we can view your information if you're not being secure online.
So great. Thank you for mentioning that. It's actually like I actually use the website called haveibeenpawned.com and see that whether they have ever breached or not. And that's kind of like one of the great resources I kind of use. Haveibeenpawned.com is one of the kind of like as to see that how much their information, and adding my email to show like work email, definitely to show that whether it has been breached or not. And especially like when we talk about like domain search and like password component, like how the password, if I type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and like how many times it has been pawned. So that like making sure that like a password management needs to be strong. I agree with like, that's kind of like get their hands dirty in the water to open up the world of what I can say, like very, very interesting skill set, which will help them to get not only employment, but passionate solving the problems in the real world.
Yeah, one other thing you could do is download denial service tools, something like Rudy and other things, and you can have them practice that in class, right? And show them how to mitigate these attacks, like, for example, setting limits to how many times a request can be sent to a computer. And this just allows them to kind of get a real world experience about it. I also actually have my students, and they actually like this. When you have them practice social engineering tactics in class, you know, they kind of see it as an acting class, and it's fun because you can tell them, hey, I want you to come up with a pretext for a social engineering attack, and just kind of have, you know, display that in front of the class so the rest of the class can view that, and they're like, oh, this is really interesting to see it in person rather than just reading about it.
Exactly. And some of the one of the story, not only story, sorry, the YouTube video I share is like with Netflix also, there is a movie called Catch Me If You Can. And that particular YouTube professional who was a kind of an actor who wore different uniforms and literally like travel across the world without a plane ticket, literally pretending like a pilot or an airline staff. And that's kind of like helps them to see that particular person get caught and then later was pardoned and joined FBI for entire career. So how he shared his experience of saying like that this was not a good idea and how it will happen. Yes, Litany, the resources will be, the slides will be available to you. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, all of you. So
yeah, somebody mentioned the cyber kill chain, and that's a good place to go to. Mitras cyber kill chain kind of shows them a process and gives them lots of examples and threats that have been handled. So that's always a good place to create research papers, discussions, things like that. So you know, it's almost everything is in there. So.
Do you think it's important to mention its origins and how Lockheed Martin made that?
I usually don't, but
I usually mention it at the end, if they're interested in knowing more about it, but I don't like introduce it at like Lockheed's cyber kill chain.
right.
Oh, okay. I was just curious about
It
that because
seems to
sometimes
be
I like to
this-
introduce things.
It seems to be the standard now, so. But you can, I don't know how important that is, but.
Best to just kind of get into it and just
Yeah,
mention
I
all the
mean,
steps.
to tell you the truth, I use it more. I teach ethical hacking, and that's when we use that quite a bit. We're trying to, walk through the process and then use that as we're doing our labs and understanding what each stage of the kill chain is. So that's in an intro class. I would say introduce it, show it to them, maybe make them do some research to use it a little bit, but not an exercise or two, but you're not really going to dive into it much until you get, I don't think, until you get farther along in the programs.
So my take on cyber kill chain is it is important to share the resources, and especially when we talk about like we need to study the student population we teach. And when we talk about reconnaissance and different terminology, they may not be aware of like this is the first time they are actually hearing. So just kind of as Anthony mentioned and other colleagues as well, that introduce it, don't deep dive into it because there are a lot of things to cover within the introduction, because they also have to aware of like other topics of like what are the different types of attackers, like which is
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think because we talked about a wide range. If you're having like a gen ed course, the content's going to be way different than if it's a 3,000 level course for cyber or computer science majors, right? So and if you try to mix them all together, that's going to be very difficult. So I would think that if you were going to make it a gen ed class, then it would be more of a very broad overview elevator kind of 10,000 level look at everything versus a slightly more technical look if it's like I said, for a upper division course for students that are going to be in the major. I don't think you could mix those. If you did, it'd be really very difficult, and I think a lot of people would either be left out or bored one or the other. So that's just my take. Yeah.
So one of the things is that like, again, it varies with across the nation, and particularly whether whether a student is taking this class in a community college 2 years, technical college, which is very much prepared, like 2 years transfer colleges or minority serving colleges or 4 year of colleges, and what format they are taking, whether it's a synchronous online or asynchronous, hybrid or in person. Majority of the schools may not have resources to go deep dive into kind of like a different tools. And when students are actually downloading this open source security software, they also have to make sure that they are using properly and need to be aware of it. What are the boundaries they should not be crossing? And when they are trying, I always encourage my students, try under supervision of somebody, because you never know that there is a very thin line. And especially when we talk about young generation, they're very excited to try something new, which is, I really appreciate that. But also we need to also come up with that ethics standard, code of conduct, and that's kind of like we cover in the intro level class. And I think that this is a great segue to the moving to the next topic, what we cover in the introduction. And again, you can play around with your student population and see that like what your students' content are. One of the first thing you may want to do in your class, if you see that you have students who are highly technically sound to accommodate everyone, to have a survey or having an anonymous survey that add your background of cybersecurity, or kind of adding a question that like, what do you do in this particular scenario? So it can be anonymous. They do not have to disclose their information. So you'll have an idea that what type of students and what content level they are comfortable in, so that we can approach the second, third, and fourth week in according to that. So, sorry. So it is also important to mention that who are the attackers and what are the types of attackers when we look at, like, especially motivation wise. I also have apart from cybersecurity and computer engineering, I also have a criminology background. So in criminology, I learned that like it's very important to ask why we are doing it, how we are doing it, and what we are doing it. So those three questions, I know it's a little bit philosophical, but this is important because if we don't know why we are studying it, then it is very difficult. Like we literally go like an kind of like very a circle, like what we're looking at. So it is very important to cover, apart from like what are the types of attacks, who are the attackers can be. So there are different categories. For example, state-sponsored script skiddles, which people who are not that much technically sound, but if they can get kind of like very less technically sound, but they can do really bad damage. So insider attacks can be possible, people who are literally working and go literally like work with adversaries. Hacktivist, people who are literally what I can say is like motivated by ideological rather than if they are working for a particular organization or company. Cyber terrorist, particularly some people who are motivated by very, very extremism ideas and try to attack, or when we say like target, the target for them is not any country but also like a kind of like they target the way of people live. So it is very important for them to understand, and these are the topics can be covered when we talk about like within the intro to cybersecurity or information security. Coming up, I think that we already discussed like social engineering attack. I think that as the intro to cybersecurity, social engineering is one of the kind of biggest talking points currently. People do not have to have a technically sound to target somebody, especially when we talk about phishing, tailgating, baiting, kind of like different categories of it. The one of the things I think that we understand social engineering attacks through social media, but different categorizing is very, very important for them to know. Like there are specific categories for specific things, because small businesses and like do not have resources for literally like spending even $5,000 or $10,000 in security programs, components. These are the things they will help, like tie them up with your students, like, go find a business which you can talk to and educate them, like kind of spend an hour of your local community about social engineering, what you learned in this class, kind of helps them build their confidence. And again, I would like to come back to those competency that will work on the communication skills, and especially like they will get to know their client, because when they get hired in the company, majority of their clients will be non-technical and do not understand this technical terminology. So discussion question maybe, has anyone experienced social engineering, and explain. Anthony, how do you approach this particular question in your class?
Well, again, as I said before, I don't really teach intro. So I tend not to spend tons of time on definitions of things, but I do ask in about social engineering, and I mentioned a couple times when I've been social engineered and other people have been in the class, they mentioned some things. So I guess examples would work for this particular topic, actual social engineering that has happened to people and why they do it. And I think in ethical hacking, what I try to do sometimes is emphasize how smart these people are, because I've known people that have been social engineered were intelligent. I know a lawyer that got it, another woman that was very highly trained, and their techniques. So you kind of bring that out, that it's not just, oh, somebody was really silly or stupid to do this. The people that are doing it are very, very skilled. Sometimes there's a video where I think it was from DEF CON, where a woman calls this phone number for trying to get access to this gentleman's phone, and she pretends like she's his wife, and there's a baby crying in the background and all this kind of stuff. So those kind of things, videos like that would help, I think, is kind of what I would use. That's pretty much the idea anyway, just to get them interacting and understanding those types of things.
Thank you for sharing. So one of the things I would like to ask all of us, that like, when the last time you have been targeted, because we are in the industry, by social engineers, like, got a phishing email because majority of our informations are public, and how did you dealt with it?
Yeah, one thing is if you just go try to sell a car on like Craigslist, see what happens, right? When you're buying or especially selling a vehicle. I tried to sell one a couple of years ago, and I probably got 3 or 4 of those attacks where they wanted me to pay money, and then they were going to pay over the price and things like that. So they're pretty slick about that kind of stuff. So that's a
Exactly.
real good example.
Exactly. And one of the things I actually show students that how easy to get our information. And because especially when we're talking about like if student group are Gen Z or like a very young population, they like online social media presence is they share everything. Like when you talk about privacy and like what are the social media accounts they have and what they share, there is very interesting take on that, like what are the information they share on social media. So I kind of asked them when the last time they Googled themselves and see that what internet has, and the way they conduct themselves, it also impact their future employability. And kind of like some of the resources I share, like we share with which like Anthony mentioned that like Carnegie Mellon has a really good write-up for like what is social engineering attacks, what are the types of attacks and how it is happens. And then another one is called OSINT framework. And this is one of the, I say, like holy grail of social engineering component, that it is really a social open source contribution about like when we talk about like OSINT framework and how the information can be gathered. And with username, email address, domain, MAC search, there is also social networking. And particularly when we talk about like mobile simulation training, if they would like to go further on that. So this is kind of like help them to see that how the knowledge kind of expands through various ways, like even dating website, which is a very, very kind of like we all are attached in some way than the other, and how those information actually kind of gets into the people who are adversaries or people who are targeting, and how it kind of impacts their day-to-day life. So having this kind of like a demonstration helps them to see the deeper component of cybersecurity and what they can actually do with the skills they are learning in this particular class, and how they can actually move on with like they can pick a simple topic and make it a career out of that. And which is a very much like every topic they see within the cybersecurity, there is a job opportunity or a kind of a career opportunity for them to excel, because the cyber landscape is so new and so evolving. It's every day changing components of it. So OSINT is really an component. And also another resources I actually share with them is called Trace Lab. And when I said Trace Lab is, this is actually for them to, this is a nonprofit organization who actually does searches for if a child is missing. Like it's a very collective group who actually find missing people. And again, students can, and anyone can be part of this group and help them to search the loved one, and especially children, adults, people who with dementia, like having that connection, that human connection with all of us, which we are part of. And this is actually, they do online competitions, which they can participate with the Discord channel. So this kind of resources kind of help them to practice their skills, not only what they're learning in the classroom, but also apply it and being a part of a larger community. So I would like to open this question to our colleagues. Any other component, anyone would like to add or practice in the class when they kind of like, teach introduce cybersecurity, or would like to be added? Not, we can move on to our next topic. So that kind of like introduction, and then we kind of like switch to another topic, which is we cover in our introduction to class, called privacy. So according to NIST, assurance that the confidentiality and access to them with certain information about the entity is protected. That's the definition of privacy. But kind of I share with them, definition of privacy is different for not only different people, the definition actually varies with country to country. For example, the definition of privacy in the United States is completely different, the definition of privacy in the European Union. And within the European Union also, especially when we talk about Britain, Germany, or Finland, 3 different countries will have how they actually observe or practice privacy. The same with if we travel to Middle East or South Asia, the definition of privacy changes, and the way we practice our technologies also changes. So I kind of like introduce them various privacy concepts, again, just introducing them, and let them, if they would like to explore and kind of pursue a career, particularly GDPR, a great resources, General Data Protection Regulation. If they're planning to go for a summer vacation, also need to be practicing component. US doesn't have a kind of a federally privacy framework like GDPR, Data Protection Regulation. Each state is trying to catch up. One of the example is CCPA, which is California Consumer Privacy Act. And I think Colorado has also one, Colorado Privacy Act. So kind of introducing them, knowing their rights, or kind of like how they behave if they go to, not behave, like how they will be aware of the privacy definition in a technical context and the cybersecurity context, help them to understand. And I kind of like ask them that we are also connected, even if we are not studying about cybersecurity. We go to doctors whenever we get sick. HIPAA Act is there. FERPA Act, because they are a student, that we cannot share their grades with their parents unless they will give us the consent. So that this is one of the example I always share, that like if you are in college and your parents will come and ask me about your grades, you have to literally give your consent to us to share your information. So, and then COPA Act, which is Children Online Privacy Protection Act. So kind of like giving them not only definition of privacy, the scenarios how privacy can be different for different countries. You cross the border, definition changes, technology practice changes, law changes, and particularly act as well. And what are the Privacy and Accountability Act we are part of, even if without going through any kind of like cybersecurity courses. So that's kind of like a definition components of it. There are a couple of websites also where they can go and learn about these. And again, this is a kind of like resources available. They can literally type the particular word and learn about it. So I would like to know from all of you that like, do you cover privacy in your organization as a course or as a kind of a subject as a part of cybersecurity?
I touch on this when I teach cyber law, but that's a big kind of a topic to teach overall. But that's something I think that my students can maybe like understand a little bit better than other pieces of cyber law. Like they think it's kind of cool when you get to like the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and like how people can be, you know, prosecuted for doing certain things and going way back to like even like worms and stuff. But the privacy piece is something that they can actually go through and like look at. And the one thing I did was I introduced like, okay, why don't you read terms of service? Like there's always a terms of service that we just kind of click through. There's privacy pieces in there, and I usually pull up what I used to pull up Twitter's, but I guess X is now, and just like show them like this is exactly what they state as privacy, but everybody has something different, at least from that perspective. And they find it interesting. And I know some of my students have said they've actually gone through and looked at like other platforms that they use and read their privacy policy or find out they don't have one, which is kind of interesting.
Thank you for sharing. I actually ask to add to your point. I also ask like, when is the last time you read a privacy policy before you sign up for something? They're like none raise their hands, and they're like, okay, why do we have to read it? And I was like, you got to read it. So like it takes so long, and I was like, true, but guess what? There is, when we say like free, they are having access to your data. And it is also important for you to know, at least aware of it, because sometimes it's mandatory for our services. We have to sign up, else we will not get into, we don't have any choice, but at least you know what you are looking at. And I also add to that in the privacy, like cameras. Cameras are everywhere, not only in the United States, in Europe, in South Asia. What are the regulations? And I know that's not, there is a lot of work needs to be done when we talk about cameras and how they are going to be regulated, because even if like we visit like traffic cameras, people like there is data breach are happening to cameras, literally like get control of it. And they're like, oh, we saw this, what's called Spycraft on Netflix. Those are real? And I was like, Spycraft is a really great show. It's kind of, they show them like how it is easier to get access to the information. And when we talk about privacy, also how we practice by sharing information, also important. So it's not only like what service provider are doing to our information, it's a collective approach. So we also have to take accountability how much we are sharing with who also sharing. Frankie, yes, I agree. With different introduction to computer technology and apps cover litany FERPA and HIPAA. Yes, definitely. That's one of the things I think that like connect us, all of us, because whenever we get sick, we go to doctor, and sometimes they ask us to write a review on social media that like, oh, how is your experience? And with that, actually, we are exposing ourselves, like what services we got and what are the health condition. We actually went to the doctor and especially a clinic to practice. And there is a lot that it can be a good discussion that when we write a review, how much information we should be exposing that we discussed with doctors. But as a regular people may not have those information that they're aware of. They kind of like believe in trust that, okay, somebody gave me wonderful service, we'll go and literally write it down. These are the conditions we discussed with the clinical practitioners. They gave this service. They literally share every detail. And I think that the awareness is very important. Like, we are in a free society. They can choose whatever they choose to disclose, but it's also important to know that, like, who have access to those information. So thank you so much for sharing this. So, Anthony, do you have something to add to this?
I can't really think of anything. It seems like everything was covered pretty well. Again, just anything I teach, I try to resort to examples and get the students active in whatever it is, even if I don't cover every single detail of each topic, because they're not going to retain everything anyway. I try to make the learning environment where they're going to ask relevant questions. They're going to know which questions to ask, that kind of thing. Teachable moments is what I try to create in any class I teach. And so it just depends. Again, it's hard to specify because there's such a wide range, whether it's an elective or a general ed course or a major course. The topics are different, but the teaching concepts, I think, are the same. And so that would be my take from my experience.
Thanks for, excuse me, everyone. So one of the things I actually do is I actually do a lot of activities. So I kind of share them as survey, or I can kind of like do Sudoku with like asking a question. And Sudoku is a game, I think, that we all play some kind of in our party. And we kind of like, I do it in the class, even if it's a undergraduate like class, because I ask them like, what are the different practices? And I kind of tell them whether they should be they should be like, thinking before posting, or what are the things like they should be aware of, like what are the apps they are signing up. People, like especially students, love video games, and how video games can be like privacy breach and components of it, kind of like having to learn kind of that kind of connection helps them to understand that, okay, these are the technologies I'm practicing and I have to be responsible for. And again, if the intro to class is much more kind of Gen Z component, like people who are like 17 to 21, 22, it kind of helps them because they are very much involved in technology, AI, and what is video games. They literally can play video games more than 16 hours a day. Renee, you have a question.
Yeah, one of the things that I would suggest, Anthony, I know you teach at a higher level for the cybersecurity, is to employ some informal, with the formal assessments that you do for the students. And that way you're kind of incorporating spaced repetition, right? You're trying to make sure that you talk about the things that they've learned so far into a course. As professors, we have to kind of make time for those review sessions, because by going over something they have learned, they may be possibly forgetting, it'll help them to recall and retain better. And it's been well documented and researched that spaced repetition actually does work in both informal and formal assessments.
Thank you, Renee. It's really great. The review is really important, according to me, that like, especially like surveys and kind of like what they learn, kind of asking them what I taught 2 weeks ago and asking them in the 4th week. And they're like, oh God, Professor, why are you asking? We just finished that. We finished quiz on all the assignments. And I was like, no, it is also important for you to retain what you are learning, because if you don't retain, then guess what? Like, the next class you will take, you will forget what you learned in the introduction, because it kind of builds it up, what we learn, and then the second advance. So I completely agree with you regarding that. So after privacy, definitely, which is ethics. And as we all know, ethics is one of the biggest thing we practice on day-to-day life. And as a cybersecurity professionals, the power of information we have and the power of information we kind of carry, it is very, very important that we follow certain ethics, starting with personal and then values. And then, we are part of different groups. So it is very, very important that we promote trust and integrity and accountability in the cyberspace, because there is defense and there is adversaries who do not have to follow any rules and regulations. And there are people who have to follow code of ethics because we carry those powers of information, personal information, access to personal information, not only the organization we work for, but also the clients, starting from all PIIs, if people who work in database, and educators who may have access to student credentials, first name, last name, literally like additional information as well. So it is very important that in Intro to Cybersecurity course, we actually talk about ethics in cybersecurity. So these are like great resources for you to kind of create a template like ISC Square. This is ISC Square ethics, ACM Code of Ethics, IEEE Code of Ethics, ISACA Code of Professional Ethics, CompTIA Professional Code of Ethics as well they have. And everything is actually on their websites. Offensive security values. And this is actually an organization, Offensive Security, who do OSCP certification values. So these are kind of like great resources when we go through code of ethics. And I think many of our organization also have our own code of ethics, like student code of ethics, professors code of ethics as well. So covering these topics helps them to understand that not only like they can held the power of information and data as a part of cybersecurity professional, but also they have to practice that power carefully, considerably, and they are accountable for certain standard. If they will violate, guess what? It will be impacted, not only impact them, but also surrounding. And so it is very important that they're part of the organization and practice the code of ethics and standards. So one of the questions, I think, Anthony, really great in kind of like when we are discussing yesterday, that why should we be ethical when being unethical can be profitable? And they can do a paper of that. But Anthony, would you like to add like why you asked this question to them and what maybe your experience look like?
Just sometimes try to change gears and surprise them a little bit. So I'll use a scenario or ask them like who the highest paid or who makes the most money in the state of Florida, that kind of thing. And people will say, maybe a football coach or a doctor or a lawyer. But what I'll say, well, what about drug dealers and, that kind of thing, drug kingpins, and just to make them think about things a little bit, that can you make a lot of money? Can you do things? Can you be successful and not ethical? That kind of thing is just to make them think about that. And I do mention when we teach ethics, I teach it in software engineering, and we go through all the different types of ethics that there are, and all the categories and things like that. And so it's fairly detailed. We spend a couple of sessions on that and have them write a paper usually.
I feel like if I was their student and I'd answer that question, I'd probably say something like it depends on your risk tolerance for one.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point, right? Do you want to be really rich because you'll save money? Yeah,
and if
you're absolutely right.
And if you even have a moral compass, if you have no moral compass, well, what's your risk tolerance then?
Right. If you're willing to live that life. But the point is just to kind of get them think about and get out of the box of just yes, they always answer yes, because everybody knows what ethical is, and they kind of so sort of pull them out sometimes. So scenarios are good for ethics. I had another thought, but I lost it. So it's a good topic to play with. There's lots of scenarios, especially I imagine for cyber, I use it mainly for software engineering.
I agree with both of you that depends on the risk appetite and tolerance level. I also say that like apart from like drug and who has the highest money and the power component of it, there are certain work roles we do, especially people who serve for this country and like serve for the country, and especially like when we talk about like state, like some of our students work for state and government, and they have also access. And how do we actually draw that moral compass? And it is very important, like not only put them in the scenario, but also like having a discussion And I teach ethics class from last 5 years, and coming from criminology kind of helps that kind of having them discussion, and a very healthy discussion, that like what is their position, and like, you know, data sharing, and when we talk about like who should have access to, and it's very fascinating to see that where they stand. And the topics also come up with like using of technology to do certain things. Like, for example, some people really become passionate about electronic vehicle, like EV, like how do we actually use that, and collected information, climate change. And that kind of impacts our cybersecurity discussion, because at the end of the day, they are actually using technology to do different kind of jobs in different kind of critical infrastructure. So I completely agree. Excuse me. Completely agree that one of the scenarios, and especially when we talk about ethics in the class, we can have those scenarios and kind of encourage them to participate in a discussion, and to see that like where, like how can they kind of like the next employable role they are taking, so that they can maintain themselves to the highest code of ethics when they are pursuing the career in cybersecurity. So any additional thought anyone, any of our colleagues would like to add to this, if they teach or the background in ethics, like any examples in their classrooms they would like to share? Okay, then. So we'll move on to our next topic. So next is in the intro to cybersecurity, kind of cover all types of, I think Paige also already mentioned that, like the Fraud Act, and what are the different kind of policies, standards, and guidelines and procedures have in the United States, and also with our allies, that importance of policies place. Every organization has different policies, especially like when it is started. And again, these are like very much they need to know in one of the courses, but it will expand when they will literally take a privacy policy class or privacy engineering class. Some of you are also teaching cyber law class, but having know this terminology helps them to move on to their next level, kind of upper level classes, like Federal Communication Act, when it started. We all actually go through credit score when it was done. Copyrights Act, like if somebody is using a particular, like we are using like different kind of tools as a part of cybersecurity, who owns that? And what is the copyright law? And different types of copyright law, particularly I take them to create a GitHub account. And in the GitHub account, when they are actually doing a repository, they had to choose what type of copyright license they are actually adding it. And so we kind of like go over it, that like there are different copyrights law and how it kind of different, like MIT has a different license than fair sharing, and where the credit is due needs to be given, because I kind of like put them in a situation, kind of role play. How do you feel if somebody will steal your work and without giving proper recognition or proper citation? Because that was always comes up when we talk about like standard guidelines, plagiarism, that these are the kind of laws. Again, there are many laws I added, but in the intro level class, it is very important for them, especially understand Computer Security Act or Digital Millennium Copyrights Act, computer, especially Economic Espionage Act. So these are kind of like ask them to study, especially forming in them a group and write a paper about it, or kind of like play a scenario. What do you think it will happen particularly? Kind of gives them kind of understanding of what are the policies and standards and guidelines. And one of the things in the class, I also mentioned that those are not same. Policies, guidelines, standards, and procedures are completely different. The difference in a simple sentence, when we talk about policies and standards, is if someone violates the policy, the impact will be severe. They may get let go from their company, or they may have some penalties under the court of law. But when we talk about procedures and guidelines, if somebody violates it, then they are not necessarily violating the laws or get into trouble that much when we talk about policy. So kind of like distinguish between what is policies they need to follow properly and in comparison to guidelines and procedures in the organization, which have least penalty than when we talk about somebody violate a policy and have a larger kind of like penalties kind of like within the court of law. So kind of like, again, I added like a multiple cyber policies, which is, sorry, components, US Freedom Act, Patriot Act, that like how our information can be taken based on what are the work or kind of like people have done things and what are the acts have been in place, National Cybersecurity Protection Act. So I think that one of the discussion questions, like when yesterday I and Anthony are discussing that how do we approach, and we actually do it in our classes, that provide some examples how we can protect against identity theft, especially instruct students find out more about policy to give a presentation, kind of helps that activities to differentiate between policy, cybersecurity policy, standards and guidelines and procedures.
I actually recently had successful class with ethics in computing, and some of the topics you just covered. One of the things I did is I opened up a few break rooms in Zoom, and I told my students to go ahead and pick a room to join up to a certain amount. I think it was like 4 people. And I said, choose one from the list. And then I want you to do 2 things: define what it is, and then find a real world case. So I let them self-regulate what they were going to choose and how they were going to choose it. I found that a lot of students drew from their real world experience. Like I had a lot of actual nurses in my class draw, the HIPAA, act, and then they went ahead and talked about that. And by having them come after their break time, I would have them come back to the main classroom and present their findings. So they would first describe it, and then they would give us a real world case. And it was very interesting, and I actually got my students interested in the conversation and actually learned something from it. They took something from that, because in the previous semester I just talked about the different laws, and I found that no student was listening. When I asked a question, they could not answer me. But by doing this group activity where I let them self-regulate and draw from their own real experiences, they actually retained it. It was a much more successful semester. So I think that's really important when you're doing something like this, to kind of use groups as a tool for this type of thing.
Thanks for sharing that. And I also agree with you. And what I have learned, so I started teaching when I finished my undergrad, and my first job was an instructor. And very early, I learned that we also learn from our teachers, and we also learn from our fellow students and classmates. So group work actually, like, that kind of motivated me to, or also like, as you mentioned, that we also teach each other, and students also learn in the classroom from each other, then also teachers. So I think that the activity you mentioned is a great example that when we kind of give them a particular task, they learn and retain much better than only when we are only teaching, or it's a with the lecture components of it, because application kind of like they're practicing. Again, I will come back to those competency, like the employment of communication, when you talk about like problem solving, critical thinking, and they are going to the world, whether it's internet, whether it's Google, whether it's AI, they're using that to find out those information, because to become a responsible citizen, they need to go through this particular, not only group activities, they also need to learn that we all are different, and we also have a common thing to address in an environment. Any other examples in the class, like how, if you ever like taught this topic, how did you address it in your classrooms, if you'd like to share, apart from group activities, kind of make it the class interactive? So I would like to add another component is that what I do in my classes, that IAPP organization has a lot of resources as a part of kind of teach when we talk about Institute of, sorry, not this one. International Association of Privacy Professionals, and they also have a lot of like resources, for example, like topics related to like privacy and ethics and webinars. So I actually like task students to go and watch a webinar, which is upcoming event during class time, of course. And if there is kind of alternate class time, I kind of make sure that they have a recorded version so that every student can be accommodated, because our students are also working 2 to 3 jobs to pay for their college education. So kind of it helps them to go not only listen to the professor, but also industry practitioners, and a discussion about how they actually talk about these particular acts, and where they stand and how it has been practiced in different countries, because IAPP is spread through all over the world. This is a great resources for everyone if they are looking at or teaching some kind of like privacy or security, or especially like privacy practice within the technology environment, or looking forward to proposing a course like Intro to Privacy or within cybersecurity, helps tremendously. Especially they have white papers, and especially artificial intelligence and videos and graphics as well. And to create an account, you don't have to pay anything. But yeah, to become a member, they do. So, Anthony, do you have anything to add before we proceed to the next topic?
No, go ahead. I don't have anything extra.
Thank you. So,
the question was about activities. I think, did we get to Clark yet? Did we show them the Clark database? Because there's hundreds of activities there that you can get ideas from that people have used in cybersecurity. And you can search under categories and things like that.
yes, it is the next slide.
It's coming up. Okay, yeah. So when we get to that part, that's something that's been put together by the CAE community of people that, as they had successful activities, they've posted them, and there's.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No worries. Next topic we cover in a kind of like is password management, and I think that like it's one of the things when we talk about intro to cybersecurity is that it depends on which student population you are teaching, but many times password management also, like in my experience, intro to cybersecurity, it's important to cover. And again, I think that we already covered haveibeen.com website about like what are the passwords they should not be using, and particularly encourage them use their skills, their language abilities. Many times students speak 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 languages, and how they can actually incorporate their strength within the password and bring them to cybersecurity. It's very, very fascinating to understand, and especially password management policy. And which industry is very much impacted when we push a password management. For example, couple of years ago, almost 3 to 4 years ago, we didn't had multi-factor authentication. We added like the duo security push. I think recently it was mandated by president that like we need to have multi-factor authentication, like has to literally push a particular mandate. And I think everybody now following like a duo security, like a kind of like one-time password code. But a couple of years ago, I remember it was not part of the practice. So password management is another important topic you may want to address to your students, because that's like, asking the questions like, what are the different ways we can authenticate ourselves? And there is like a simple way, kind of adding username and password, where there is extra layer of security using your phone number, or using a third-party authentication, or using a third-party device like YubiKey to kind of authenticate. And then there is digital signature. Like, again, it kind of like expands within the topic, but it's very important for them to cover, like when we talk about like a password management component of it, by discussing and kind of intro level. So now we kind of come up with the, when we talk about like teaching resources, and these are the resources which actually everyone can actually adopt. They Anthony was talking about Clark, and I would like to share that as well. Give me a second, please. So Clark has lot of like collection of resources where you can do tools like standard guidelines, and this is actually have put like competency constructor as well. You can go to you can browse with curriculums and resources. If you browse the resources, it will take you to different directories as well, which I think Anthony, you are mentioning about this one, correct?
Yeah, that's Clark. That's the one I was talking about.
So I also use in my classrooms, kind of help students to see different kind of events, and they also have different topics you can look for. Like, for example, I would, for now, we discussed about suppose cyber law, and you can see that they have trainings available, incident response, and it is completely free. You can share with your students, and different level as well. The materials, it's a fantastic component of like, you can add like the high school, and it will come to into cybersecurity, legal ethics, and cyber wars, and especially gen cyber contents are added, and there is videos. And if I'll just show one, it's something looks like this, and you can see that like they have kind of like date wise, it's a pretty organized resources for us to share with our students. They can actually go over it when they have free time as well, and I incorporate in our classroom. And I think many of our colleagues as well, I think Anthony also incorporate. Paige, I'm aware that you also use that. And so Clark is a great resources for all of us to incorporate in our intro to cybersecurity class as well. So apart from that, there are the resources I shared. There are some websites which is it's very important that we kind of like learn about it, that if we are not using it, you can take advantage of it. And again, one of the best thing is that like you don't have to have a lab in your institute or in your organization to teach a cybersecurity class. So for example, Cengage, I use Cengage in one or two of my classes. They have wonderful labs for ethical hacking and network security as well. Try Hack Me. I think that before us, many of our colleagues actually covered it. They also have a teaching component of Try Hack Me. So if your organization or if you have funding, you can actually provide your students with the Try Hack Me educational platform. It is again like Cengage, where you can actually assign them labs and track their progress, whether your students are actually finishing or not. JB Learning and Zybooks, also another platform you can use for your computer science classes and programming classes, but also you can use if you are doing like a upper level classes like cloud environment. JB Learning provides great resources. Vital Source is many times provides faculties, if you really want to reach out, a book which is you are kind of incorporating in your classroom multiple books together, and you don't like, students do not have to follow, but as a teacher, we had to do multiple resources to prepare one class, and it's a lot of preparation, which we had to do at the back end to deliver that 10 hours or 20, 40 hours courses based on where we are teaching. Pearson View also, and these platforms and these resources provides teaching resources as well. I would also like to also share regarding case study and report, especially like cybersecurity component. There is also a European Union. I use as a part of my courses is just a second. Name ENSA, and they actually provide threat report for every year, and they also have resources about cyber threats, which you can also incorporate in your class. They have different tools, and again, this is actually helps our students to practice different kind of like sources, which is kind of broaden their horizon, not only in the United States, but also kind of like how in a different continent and different countries practice cybersecurity. It has been 20 years, and their topics and resources are really, really great. Any other resources, any of our colleagues would like to add, or something if we are missing, particularly out of these? Yes, Clark is also within the kind of like Common Use Act. So now also we thought of adding to other in the introduction to cybersecurity class. It's important that to be part of community, because if we walk alone, then we will not able to win a particular battle when we are talking about in cybersecurity, because it's all coming together. When we talk about cybersecurity nonprofit organization where our students can be part of, they can be part of these organizations, particularly like Security Week, Crime News, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Agency, OWASP. They have student membership as well. Science Resources, Anti-Phishing Working Group. Our students, apart from like taking intro to cybersecurity class, they should join at least if you have a college club, especially gray hat, red team, blue team. There are different teams. And I also encourage students to participate different kind of CTFs and capture the flag. I think Pico CTF is one of the good resources to be added on. Pico CTF. And for them, it's actually like a practicing about like to enhance their skills, because again, classroom, we are just getting them for a semester or for 10 weeks. They also, apart from that, they have to also do the self-learning to motivate themselves. So practicing in CTFs and participating in these different CTFs helps them to understand like how they can practice whatever they're learning in the intro to cybersecurity. They can also broaden their horizon and skill level the more they will participate in the different kind of CTFs. Try Hack Me is a great resource. Hack the Box is another resources to be added to that. Anthony, how do you teach ethical hacking class? So what else resources you add to your class apart from the lab groups in the classroom?
Other than the things that you've mentioned here, I
Yes.
really can't think of anything other resources. I mean, we have a cyber range and lots of VMs and networks that we create and create the scenarios, but I don't know of any other resources that we haven't talked about.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else would like to add any other resources? And do you think like we missed it? Feel free to add that in the chat as well. So moving on. So D&I, which is very close to our heart, like, you know, diversity and inclusion is a part of like, because as we know that like in certain groups in cybersecurity, representation is very much, if we say women participation in cybersecurity is very less in comparison to other groups. And when we talk about cybersecurity, I am myself involved in women in cybersecurity since its inception, 2014. And I think recently we just celebrated our 10th anniversary, which was in Nashville, Tennessee. And WESES is a part of organization. If you don't have one, please start a club. You do not have to be like just have to be passionate about cybersecurity and encouraging everyone to participate, because we need different point of view to address a cyber breach, or like come up with mitigation strategies. Cybersecurity is another organization you may want to, like in minority groups. Women Cyber Jujitsu is also organization which is really kind of like, and these are recommendations, there are many, just wanted to put out there. With women in cybersecurity, you can also, your students can, you can add it in your intro level class. Your students can start a club if you don't have one. You can also have affiliate groups, which is based on the topics. And you can also use like different kind of organization in different countries. So it's very much, it has spread it all over the world, which is started by Dr. Amberin Siraj. And so again, these are kind of like organizations, apart from our classrooms, student also needs to get involved with, support each other to raise, when we talk about like the biggest problem in cybersecurity currently is we do not have enough skilled people to address all the jobs openings we have. I also share with them certain, which I'm about to share, is that like CyberSeek map, which will help them to see this one particularly. Sorry, give me a second just to pull up. I kind of like show them in our intro class, like how cybersec is, like jobs are available in the state of Washington. There is 7,500, state of Texas, 36,000, state of Florida, if we can say 21,000. Again, it's kind of like give them like private, public sectors, and how diverse the cybersecurity is. Any strength, any subject they're passionate about, they can pursue a career in cybersecurity, which very, very difficult to get if they will go to any other domain. So within the intro to cybersecurity class, if they're thinking of switching any other majors or component, this is one of the way I kind of tell them, it's like, give me any other major where you can apply your skill set, who you are in your domain or career to pursue. That's kind of cybersecurity. Maybe I'm biased, but anyway. So this is one component. And I also use nice cybersecurity work role, which that's one of the things in the intro to cybersecurity class. Give me a second, please, to pull up as well. And this website is actually in a, they are updating. So this one actually a great resources for all of our students to introduce exactly when we are teaching, doesn't matter what type of population we are actually teaching. The cybersecurity workforce nice framework. And again, this is actually being updated. As you can see, they recently like added components, which is 1.0 version of it. But again, just to, in the website, they kind of different categories, like they have 7 categories and 52 work roles. And they also added some additional component of it, but students can play around with it, and especially with the work role. And if we talk about like entry level components, they can actually, for example, cyber defense analyst, it will give them not only work roles, skills and abilities, particular components of it, knowledge, task, specific areas they are looking for. So it will help them to answer the questions, majority of the questions. For example, if I go to the cyber defense analyst role, it will not only give them what the specific areas, but also what are the knowledge they should be acquiring to fulfill this particular role in the industry. And that's kind of like a fascinating resources for them to have it. And to, I know it can be overwhelming. They will be like, oh, I need to learn everything. Well, we need to educate that they don't have to learn everything for this. And kind of the skill set, task they need to finish. And we will be looking at to the competency level as well, especially providing advices. And again, they have 52 roles. They don't have to go for cyber defense analyst role if they don't want to. And again, if they're coming from military or have like 10, 15 years of IT experience, they can choose a senior role. So we need to have we need to communicate with our students based on their ability. And I think that Anthony mentioned that to meet where they are in their journey in cybersecurity, because our journey and their journey will be completely different. Anthony, do you use, I think you use this, but how do you use in your senior level classes? Anthony, I think you are mute.
Oh, I don't know that I've used this before.
Okay.
Just any of, like I said, we may show it. I don't think I use this
Okay.
particular tool.
Okay. No worries. And this is tools like actually provides them the cybersecurity kind of like a tool map about like where they stand when we talk about intelligence, intel, cyber ethics components of the talent management. And they can pull up any role. For example, if we are teaching, like suppose not every school you are part of have a cybersecurity program. They can literally see, like suppose data analyst. As a data analyst, what are the roles kind of coming back to the cybersecurity task, capabilities, indicators? Again, a lot of micro level, deep dive into it, and being a entry level, what are the topics they should be looking at? Fantastic tools to be part of if you really would like to incorporate in your intro level class. This will help tremendously, kind of like motivate your students to be part of that. Another component also have is they do have a cybersecurity job map, I think roadmap as well. So kind of like you can let them play around with this particular topic and website as well. Thank you, Joe. DCWF also have another really great resource. So thank you so much for adding that. So coming back at last, talking about employability. So recently, CAE came up with to enhance kind of more competency when we talk about, and again, competency has like different A, B, C, D, E component when we talk about what is competency means. And particularly if a student is able to finish a particular task. And within that, E is for employability. So I just wanted to mention it's A, B, C, D, E when we talk about like competency. And one of the attribute of the A, B, C, D, E component is employability. So again, that's what I mentioned that I'm also a regional trainer and got trained under Zoe and Vinny from about the competency. But it is very, very important that whenever we are teaching any course, we kind of add some of the attributes of the competency to our teaching. And so the students will be able to enhance. And many things we have already discussed: critical thinking, communication, leadership, responsibility and integrity, ethical judgment, which is part of like our discussion. And monitoring, particularly, let me pull up this website. And this is a great resources to be in, is that Monitrate College has 360 competency when we talk about competencies. And it's a great resources for you to incorporate in your class because it will help the CAE designation process as well. So for the employability, as I mentioned in my slides, those are 5 components, but there are others as a part of like how to develop a competency, the best way. They kind of like every activities we do, not only on campus, but in the classroom also, it should be enhancing, again, critical thinking, communication components of it, kind of like chose. These are the examples of like how they have incorporated. And I thought that to add this information to this particular intro to cybersecurity and this to lecture as well. And I would like to know if anyone is implementing that, or if not, like how can we enhance? I would like, Joe, do you have any components or kind of like points to add to when we talk about like competency, how to incorporate?
I think within CAE community, it's always worth thinking about our students having the opportunity to discover the kind of work roles that they want to do. And I think it's really helpful that you referred to NICE and DCWF framework there. And when they begin to think about that fit, thinking about what the workplace is like, and that's very much why we look at these employability skills, whether we call them professional skills or soft skills. We want to make sure, even at an intro level, that our students understand not only that technical content of cybersecurity, but also what it would mean to work within that kind of a workplace. What kinds of collaboration might they do? What kinds of communication might exist there? Reporting up towards C-suite, reporting, like you said earlier, with non-experts, perhaps having to articulate things through a deck, PowerPoint deck, writing a report, or simply being able to articulate oneself in a meeting. And I think you've kind of stitched that all the way through your presentation so brilliantly. You know, we think a lot about ethics, we think a lot about integrity. And the reason we're trying to make that shift towards think about competency is not to replace the curricula which we're delivering, but just to make sure that students get that opportunity to make connections with the workplace.
Thank you for adding that. And again, you can reach out to Joe if you would like to include like more ABCD competency and learn about it. And again, reach out to me as well if you kind of know how I apply competency in my all types of courses I teach, starting from intro to cybersecurity to master's level components of it. I would like to hear any of other colleagues who kind of incorporate any other activities apart from group activities, breakout sessions, case studies. What are the other activities you can think of, like we can add in intro to cybersecurity course, which will help our students to learn more about cybersecurity and kind of like literally put them in cybersecurity rather than pursuing other careers.
And can I jump in there as well, Deveeshree? We've got Dan Manson is leading an amazing project researching how competitions work with students. And one of the things which are coming out of that is that you don't need to be following a cybersecurity major to be able to take place effectively within a cybersecurity competition. So, you know, again, at an intro level, that doesn't mean you can't access these extracurricular things such as competition team, which your institution might have, or a cyber club, which they might be running. The research data is showing a lot of students kind of have this imposter syndrome. You know, they think cybersecurity, everyone knows far more than they do. They know it at a much higher level. And I think so much what we can do is help build the confidence of our students. And again, you know, the presentation you've given today, this intro showing relevance for everyday lives, revealing to them what they already need and giving them that little bit of confidence to get involved perhaps in a club, to have a go at going something like the WESIS conference, to take part in a competition. They're all good ways then being able to grow without them necessarily having to be a cybersecurity major or an expert approaching a capstone class.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. And I think that that's kind of like, sorry, my slides go up suddenly. Sorry, give me a second, please. God. Technology, the way we love it, there's sometimes it's kind of like, oh God, sorry about that. So that's kind of like, again, as Joe mentioned, ethical judgment and responsibility, that kind of comes to the conclusion of our talk. And thank you so much for giving us an opportunity for, in conclusion, I would like to mention that there are a lot of resources for our teachers to help us in our teaching. And we just have to ask. One of the things when I was a grad student and when I become a teacher is that like, even if I don't find in a website a particular resources, I just write to them and reach out if they can provide a particular tool, which is maybe they charge like per user $30. Would they give us a trial just to practice for our students? You know, we have 30 students or 40 students. That's the class size. I teach almost 50. And many times I never heard a no from them, rather than they are willing to make that discount for educational purposes and for the learnings. So again, feel free to reach out. And Anthony, as a part of email address, if you have any questions regarding, some of you mentioned Splunk. Splunk also provides, based as a part of their educational pledge, free Splunk to download and practice students about their labs and visualization, virtualization as well. Tableau provides educational softwares. There is open source softwares also available, Kali Linux, Sodan. There are many being a part of, as an educator, we can have access to. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions and if you have any feedback as well, so that how can I improve in teaching. Again, as I said, like, you know, I'm not perfect, but we are here to help each other out, especially for teachers who are actually starting your career as a professor. Remember that it is important to pay attention to the detail, and be kind to yourself, because you have to prepare a lot to deliver a 40 hours lecture class. When we talk about, there is a lot of preparation behind it. And so be kind to yourself while, you know, you're starting this journey, because sometimes it can be a lot feeling. And I just wanted to address that like, it's kind of part of it. Anthony, do you have any conclusion to make?
Not really, just reemphasize a very broad topic, and you definitely need to focus on your audience to determine how to develop the course and focus your energies to that, and not try to cover everything. And again, if you have any questions or that we can help with, certainly email us. And if we don't have them, we have some very competent people that teach the intro course. One of them is an adjunct that runs his own cyber security company. So he's extremely knowledgeable and has a lot of ideas and things. So we can probably get you some help in that respect.
Great. And I had references, and the slides are actually I shared with Paige as well to share with all of you. And thank you so much for listening to us for the last almost 2 hours. We really, really appreciate it. And again, feel free to reach out. And
And
if
thank
you
you
have any
guys.
questions.
Thank you guys for doing this, Deveeshree and Anthony. This was awesome. The slides I do have, they will get sent along when I send the recording next week, which will be available. So thank you guys again so much. This was really insightful. I see a lot of people want all the resources that you guys have provided. So that will be out next week. And if anybody has any questions, feel free. If not, thank you both for presenting. Thank you all for attending. And keep an eye out for registration for next semester for this workshop series.
Thank you for
All
the
right,
invite.
great job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
See you all next time.